I'm always interested when, because whether you're talking about assistant coach or head coach, recruiting is just as important as wins and losses. And some places it may even be more important. What in your mind makes a coach a good recruiter versus, say, an average or bad recruiter?
Want to just drive.
Right.
I mean, Bill Bush, I've been at some public events with him, and his wife was a former Husker cheerleader, Laura, and at St. Michael's last year we had an event, and he goes, "Honey, stand up." He goes, "People always ask me why I'm a good recruiter. Look at my wife." He goes,
Right.
I can convince any, he's a salesman, and and he just has a way to go about it. But you have to grind. Like a guy like Bill Bush, when he wakes up in the morning at like 6 or 7 in the morning or whatever, he's putting out like 30, 40 texts to all of his guys.
Yeah.
All of them
that he's recruiting.
And then even contacts and people around the country. He just says a good morning, just constant dialogue all the time.
So that, I mean, essentially it's just going to work, right? And then you have to really believe in what you're selling per se, right?
Like Vince Marrow at Kentucky, when
he was an excellent recruiter,
and he's one of the best in the SEC now. And that's how, Vince could claim a connection to you. Like he'd figure out who you are, and he'd know someone that know you, and then
he's going to find it out,
and then get a dialogue with you.
Right.
Sean, let me ask you this. I mean, this is always blows me away. Radio is still something that's very new for me. All this stuff is still new, for less than a year.
You're good at it.
Well, I don't know about good at it. But I look at, I was just kind of, obviously I've known about you for a long time. We've met in passing things, but, and letting listeners know too, Sean had wrote a book, and some of you don't know about that, 100 Things Nebraska fans should know and do before they die. You don't just talk about it, go on Twitter, do a research. I mean, like you mentioned about Coach Bush, you pour yourself in. You're committed to this. You're not interested. You're committed. And there's a lot of people that are interested in sports or interested in journalism or interested in football or interested in coaching, but they're not committed. You've committed to this. What's now your commitment? There's probably not a recruit we can't say right now that you haven't heard of before. You can spout it off because why? You're committed to doing it. That commitment right now, I'm not going to say what does Mickey and those guys have to do right now is what I want to say because that's our coach. Mickey has that same type of commitment. Bush has that same type of commitment. Like you mentioned, every morning he's waking up just shooting off texts. Is that what's going to take to really rebuild this thing?
Yeah, and you've seen it with Mickey on the in-state front, just the urgency. Without stepping on toes, like he just said, I'm going to take these certain guys on the in-state, and it used to not be that way. And he's like, hey, I'm taking Bellevue West now. I'm taking West Side. I'm taking Lincoln East. I got Lincoln High.
Right.
There's too many kids in the state this year for one guy to handle. And I think Mickey recognized maybe that there were some blind spots in areas where he needed to come in and deal with Cluster Johnson or talk to Damon Benning and talk to Larry Martin.
Right.
Have that connection to go into these schools.
Right.
He played with Creighton Prep's coach, Tim Yonk at Nebraska. So I think Mickey recognized like, hey, I can help us here on the in-state. I coached at Omaha North with Todd O'Neill, their OC that's still there. So he just is able to go in there and I think help in those areas and his Louisiana recruiting and, Trey Palmer. I mean, he's probably the best receiver on the team right now.
Oh, yeah.
He got him to Nebraska in one phone call.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And Sean, I wanted to ask you, the recruiting and Nebraska's done well recruiting. Like when you look at their classes every year. I mean, heck, one year we beat Michigan. You right?
Nebraska's been
in the upper half of the Big Ten,
20 to 35-ish.
Right. So that's, that's decent. Where is the disconnect from the classes that we get, at least on paper, to what ends up being the product? Because I think that's really the lost in translation right there. Whether it's lack of development or missing or just the lack of seeing the right things to what we're seeing on Saturdays. Because you always had this saying, we can't recruit all these linemen for years.
And miss on them all.
When Mike Riley was here, it's not like you guys were good in high school, then everybody just supplants themselves in Lincoln and all of a sudden can't everybody turns into a turnstile. So what is the missing potion per se?
Well, yeah, and recruiting, you look at those rankings, the top 6 or 7 teams, they're at a different level. Yeah. Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, Clemson, Notre Dame, LSU, USC.
All of
that group of teams, Miami.
We didn't even take the top 12, 15. But we're just talking about in our wheelhouse.
When you get to where Nebraska's at in the rankings, there is not a lot of separation in those classes.
Right.
It's one guy here or there that moves you up 5 or 6 spots.
Right.
But then it becomes down to do you really know your guys? Did you identify them? Did you develop them? And you look at some of the classes that Scott had that were highly ranked. They got like a big boom on guys they signed late that they didn't even really know. I mean, like Travis Fisher signed like 4 or 5 Miami kids.
Yeah, and they were gone in like 6 months.
During COVID, right? They were out of here.
And I use it like, okay, it's like you meet a girl in Vegas and get married to her in Vegas. Like you had a hell of a weekend in Vegas.
Yeah.
And then you bring her back home to Nebraska.
Yeah.
And you find a few things out. Like
what happened in Vegas, I should have kept it in Vegas.
I mean, you get like DeAndre Francois here, and he just in the middle of the night packed his stuff up and left to go to the airport.
Right.
Marcus Fleming didn't want to practice, and they said, "Oh, you're not going to travel to Iowa, then because you're not going to practice this week. You're hurt." After he just had like 90 yards against Northwestern the previous week, and he goes, "Fine, then I quit." Yeah. You know, it's like that.
You can't foresee,
but you have to find the right cultural guys. And you guys have probably been to Miami, Florida. It's a different world.
It's a different world.
Yeah, but the guys from Miami have been working other places though, because if it can work up in Wisconsin, they getting brothers all the way up there. It's colder.
You got to have the culture established.
Right. See what you just said, Sean, is culture. When I was just in Miami a week and a half ago. In fact, we did the show, was called in from there, and they had guys from Miami grads, Florida State grads, and was one from Georgia. And then I was up in Wisconsin last year, and I was there during the wintertime. And it irks me when I hear people in Nebraska or just say, well, it's hard to bring people here. I was getting people there. North Dakota's getting people there. South Dakota State has got people right there.
Like
from all over the place.
DiCaprio Budo, I'll give you a good example of him. He's a Miami guy.
Yep.
His brother's committed. They had him locked up in like June of his senior year or whatever. Like they had him
going into senior.
You know, they had a relationship. Yep. You know, they courted him. They got to know him. Oh, then they found out his brother played football at UNO. You know, his brother played. You know, he already had a brother. It's like then DiCaprio Budo ended up being a great, good NFL player.
And they only knew that, Sean, because they got to knowing a relationship and establish that.
So yeah, you have to. You got to identify your guys early in recruiting and build that core. Like Jaden Doss, Kansas City guy. He's tearing it up right now at Raymore Peculiar. Had a game with like 5 touchdowns this year. Yeah. That's the kind of guy you want here that you can get on campus, get him here multiple times. And Bill Bush worked it hard. And, like I look at our quarterback recruiting for this year. I thought it was so interesting. We had 4 Power 5 quarterbacks this year that could drive to Lincoln. A Des Moines guy, Jamie Cole's kid. Yep. You had a kid in Pierre, South Dakota, Gretna, and Wichita, Kansas. And
the Bellevue West kid.
And the Bellevue.
Yeah.
Well, the Bellevue West kid's a junior.
Okay.
Those 4 guys are Power 5 offer senior quarterbacks. Right. I've never seen that many in 1 year that could get here within
driving distance.
Yeah. And we take a guy from, far out Massachusetts, and Mark Whipple believed in this guy, but I know like they wanted, there was some heavy interest in Avery Johnson, who's going to Kansas State. And, they looked at him hard. And Jamie Cole's kid, JJ, I think was interested in Nebraska, and he was the Elite 11 MVP. But, maybe I'll eat my words here, but this kid from Massachusetts, I don't see that.
Is he a dual threat or drop back?
He's a dual threat. He's a great athlete, great player, but is he a fit? When you have these 4 cultural guys that are right around here that might be better fits. And that's where the coaches make the money and have to make those decisions. Right. And, this was a year where I'm like, man, this is a year you could have gotten your quarterback right in this region.
Talk real quick, Sean, because with Mickey being named coach, and when I watched Avery Williams from New Orleans, defensive end,
Ashley Williams,
excuse me, I saw a football player. I saw a guy playing against real talent and dominating. Now, whatever happened. Do you think that door is going to be opened again?
So I think you're right. Cam Lenhart was
decommitted.
Was a Dawson Shenander guy,
right?
And there was a little bit of
I know there were behind the scenes
because they took
they didn't want to take more than 2 defensive ends
because they told Maverick Noonan
and all that, which that might be in the next segment. I don't ever believe in promising kids, but I understand Danny, legacy and all that. But Ashley could play.
So,
and he's a top 100 kid.
The defensive staff had their sights on Lenhart.
Right.
Mickey Joseph took the Williams commit, I think, without kind of running it through, and it caused kind of a situation.
Right.
And then it allowed Ashley Williams. He tried to commit to Minnesota first.
Oh, I know.
Then he went to Nebraska.
Yeah.
Now he's at Auburn.
Auburn.
Well, what's going to happen at Auburn?
Right.
So
that's why I'm asking.
I do think there will be an opportunity
to get him back,
especially with Mickey.
And then Linhart, the first minute that Shenander was fired, he announced he was gone.
Yeah.
And that's to be expected.
Right.
And that's also should be expected, but then also you need to be respected because it lets you know Shenander actually, was recruiting.
Absolutely.
So that lets you know it wasn't all bad, even though he got relieved of his duty. So I'll always try to give the coaches their kudos when they were doing, what they were supposed to do. Sometimes it just doesn't work out. And I want to ask you in the next 1 minute, how many recruits will Nebraska have in this class this year?
Well,
I'm putting you right on the hot seat.
Nostradamus.
You the veteran. You didn't know what you was getting today, man. You getting here? I'm asking all types of questions.
It's a hard question to answer because we don't know what's going to happen on the roster. But I can tell you what they wanted it to be.
Right.
Like before, all this has happened, that they were looking at 17 to 18 high school recruits, and then backfill the rest with the portal. Late, December.
Yeah.
You don't like that. That was what the plan was last year, and everybody freaked out,
right?
Because you didn't even know that you don't know who's going to go in the portal. That's
right.
the problem.
Yeah.
And then you got to figure out these portal additions in a month.
Right.
And you got to go to Vegas and find a girl, basically. And, it's